What I wasn't aware of is that how when you're grieving, it opens you up to a level of spiritual attacks, especially when you're seeking closeness with God, because God is near to the brokenhearted and the broken spirited. And throughout this journey that I've been on, I've been having back-to-back grieving experiences from within just personally my own family and the family of somebody that I love, and just other things external that were a part of bringing on grief in ways that were to interfere with the progression that I was making. Last October of 2024, I was diagnosed with PTSD, and I was having panic attacks due to my nervous system being overworked, from me just trying to move and work through the emotional overwhelmness that I was experiencing. The sad part about it is the same individuals that I experienced the grief with and the chaos with was the same individuals that I turned to for help, who only made the situation worse. God gave me an outlet when He gave me my platform with my business to creatively speak on my journey by showing how I meet with Him through meditation and through hiking and just trusting my spirit to guide me by way of the Holy Spirit. And in January, I had my first PTSD episode where I drove home in the middle of a snowstorm following being triggered into an episode by somebody that I cared about. And the narrative of what caused my episode was twisted into a whole nother level of perspective that had nothing to do with the emotional exhaustion that I was experiencing, even from a physical standpoint, as to what occurred when I drove home. I took advice to go to the emergency room just to prove that I was just emotionally exhausted and physically exhausted from the long drive from Texas to Alabama, because I drove home to prove something to someone that was accusing me of something that I had not done. And that individual wasn't aware of the degree of what I had gone through, because they were absent for the last almost 2.5 years of my life, and was using me as a emotional punching bag when it came to the grief and the betrayal that they were doing to me and experiencing with me in the picture. That led me going to the emergency room, to the emergency room giving me a psychotic drug. I was already under a psychiatrist for therapy, and I was doing PTSD therapy, and I was already under a psychologist's treatment. And I was being treated with anxiety medicine to help with my PTSD. At the time, I wasn't taking the medicine. But when I went to the emergency room and explained all of this, I wasn't aware that they gave me a psychotic drug. And I've never had a psychotic drug ever in my life for the anxiety that I've had for a great deal of my life that I've been being treated for. They asked me, was I willing to admit myself into the mental health facility that they had available for further evaluation, which I was open to, and I was told that I could leave whenever I wanted to, because it was voluntary. For me, I didn't see anything wrong with it, from the standpoint of I was voluntarily willing to do it, and knew that if I was uncomfortable with it, that I could leave. And unfortunately, this wasn't the case. And with me already being treated via therapy in another state, I was already in the process of unraveling the emotional pain and grief that I was carrying. And when they gave me this psychotic pill, the individuals that were trying to assist me family-wise weren't aware of what I was being treated for when I went to the emergency room. They weren't aware that I had already been diagnosed. They were going based off something that my ex was communicating based off him working in a psych facility. And that whole entire experience basically led to him and a family member sabotaging my friendships and close bonds with individuals that I've had for years. And the degree of anger that I had presented based off being on the medicine and me thinking that I was being vulnerable with somebody that I could trust, my boundaries were being crossed in a way that I would have never known that these individuals would have taken it, even with me requesting for them not to disclose my personal information with individuals as I was working through this emotional crisis. This led to the facility evaluating me off of the medicine that they gave me, which was only complicating the PTSD episode that I was having. And I said a lot of emotional, hurtful things that I was carrying just based off the side effects of what I was experiencing. And this was being communicated to individuals that I would have never even disclosed the information to, because I knew that it wasn't truly how I felt. It was past tense to what was unknown and what was never communicated because of what I was carrying in my silent darkness, is the best way to put it. Apparently, even with me having the episodes, I wasn't aware that the episodes last for days. And I can take accountability to acknowledge now, that was January, we're in December now. And I've actually gotten the proper assistance that I needed to get to be fully evaluated, so that way that I could balance myself out and actually get the proper rest that was simply all that I needed, with the proper medication to assist me to help balance my mind and emotions. I can take accountability now for a lot of my actions because I was consciously in and out of reality just based off of being consistently triggered and emotionally manipulated because of conversations I was having with one specific individual that was trying to speak for me who had not even spent not one day with me to really understand what was going on with me. And between that individual and another individual that I was actually staying with, the communication in regards to my actions were being manipulated and spoken about in a very cryptic way to defame my character and what was going on with me, because I was refusing to associate myself with certain people like I used to in the past. And because I didn't want certain individuals around me that were that basically were parts of the triggers that I never actually spoke on in the first place. So a lot of my truth in regards to how I ended up in the state of mind that I ended up in basically kind of got blocked, and I wasn't even really given a proper outlet to communicate to the individuals that were a part of the process in helping me heal. I didn't really have the proper way to communicate what was going on with me because I was in a state of paranoia and was traumatized by the experience that I had at the facility. I was attacked 2 days after being admitted into the facility and was being basically drugged based off my attitude and not what the actual issue was, because I was in defense mode in regards to them refusing to verify my medical records that I had basically had just had updated in another state. This caused a lot of dysfunction and confusion amongst my family and friends that I actually valued my relationships with over the years. And 2 of those individuals actually reached out to me. One of those individuals that I was friends with for over 20 years, basically, I had one conversation with that individual, and that individual let other people literally dictate what actually was depicted as our friendship, which was kind of odd to me when nothing had to be said at all until I actually communicated to the individual. But what was done, by the time that I found peace enough in myself to want to even talk to anybody, what was done with that individual was already done, and it was a lot of betrayal in regards to what took place at that point. Another friend who kind of opened my eyes to what was happening with me, and that kind of provided the resources to my healing while I was away and living in another state. I'm grateful for her help, because she made me confront things that I know that I wasn't ready to confront, but at the same time, I wasn't completely in the dark of what was actually happening. It was a lot of spiritual manipulation and a lot of emotional manipulation being done in the background in regards to people that I honestly thought cared about me. And I had to learn on the back end that I was being betrayed by the one individual that I thought I could trust. And even though it was kind of foreseen, I think deep down what really and truly grieved me is the way that I was being spoken on behind my back, and the narrative that was being painted about who I truly was, just based off of their insecurities in regards to who they felt like I was. And it's crazy because that ended up with how the communication was between me and that individual. That ended up being the individual communicating on my behalf that I was trying to heal and resolve issues with, which was bittersweet because I was getting the assistance that I needed, but that individual was purposely manipulating and twisting conversations that were being had just so that they wouldn't look like the bad guy in regards to what triggered my initial episode in the first place. And for a long time I tried to empathize with the understanding of that because because of the degree of what that individual had also gone through. And it was like we were both emotionally bumping heads, and it was only complicating the situation because of how we truly felt about each other. And there was a level of fear on both ends in regards to just the overall experience because it was something we had never been through. And that individual had their perception of what was happening and assumptions of what was happening, and my truth of what was actually happening. And it took until September and October of this year for that individual to actually take the time to listen to me in regards to what I had been saying all year and why certain things was happening that were out of my control but in my control. And what I mean by that is, with PTSD, sometimes the episodes could last for days or months, and there were little things happening personally with me in the home environment that I was in, with family members that were, I won't say purposely triggering me, but purposely triggering me in a way that was invading my personal space and boundaries, that wasn't allowing me to find the peace that I needed so that I could rest and move forward with rebuilding what was basically destroyed by them in the first place. And my emotional reaction to a lot of things had me in a defense mode because I was being purposely provoked by individuals on the outside of my circle, as well as having my information being hacked into and compromised, and me trying to clear that stuff up and trying to access my accounts, and the frustration of trying to correct the issue led to me just having a crash out on social media. And before I knew it, I was crashing out on everybody, and I just lost it. And a lot of it I don't even remember majority of what was said. I just remember certain moments of being triggered and responding in a certain aspect when I was in the process of working, trying to delete things, like deactivating my page and trying to clear stuff up so I could start over. Like, I had already created new pages to start over, and the pages that were basically compromised and stuff like that, it was like every time I changed my passwords was being changed again right after, to where I was blocked out of the accounts. And I just got frustrated, and there were specific individuals actually in purposely inboxing me to try to provoke me. And I just crashed out. In the process of all of this, I was trying to establish my business, and a lot of things that I worked on leading up until this point was out of me just serving other people and putting other people before me, and not necessarily looking for anything in return, because it was me just trusting God to provide for me what I would need. And I even unleashed on those individuals that claimed that they were there to help and support, and in turn, while I was in crisis, there was no support. It was like the support was barely there. So I'm gonna say it like that. And I'm not the type of person to ask for help when it comes to my needs. And for me to be vulnerable enough to even have to be put in a position to ask for help, and then it turn around, and when I need it the most, it's not there in the way that I actually need it. It only made the grieving process worse, and the PTSD experience for me worse, because of me no longer having the outlets that I did have. And I think the blockage of not having those outlets is what caused me to have the crash outs on social media, because of me being spoken on behind the scenes, and nobody was actually having conversations with me directly. It was only one person outside of the initial 2 people that were trying to communicate what was going on my behalf, that reached out to me twice, and we never even really truly got a chance to really discuss the full capacity of what was happening to me, just because of my emotional reaction, and I would say overreaction to a lot of the confusion that was being placed upon me, trying to force myself to find balance. The lesson that I learned in the process of all of this was, one, how to stand on my no. 2, when God removes you out of the chaos and removes you out of a certain situation, don't look back. Because all of this started with me trying to make peace with the past. And I guess you could say I'm kind of big on closure, especially when it comes to the extent of the circumstance and what actually took place. Certain things I can easily walk away from and not look back. Other things, depending on the depth of how it affected my emotions and how it affected the other party, I try my best to make amends, to let it be known that I'm not holding any grudges or any ill will or intent in regards to trying to harm or hurt anybody, whether it's emotionally, mentally, or physically, or even spiritually. Like, I'm not a get back type of person unless you put me in a position to be that way. And one thing I can say for sure, between last year and this year, last year God opened my eyes to, when it comes to walking with him and being vulnerable with him, you're subject to spiritual warfare on a whole nother level, and spiritual attacks. And I'm grateful for a friend of mine that experienced her own level of trauma, to where her relationship with God, she was aware of how to protect herself against certain spiritual attacks, and she brought to my attention certain spiritual attacks that were possibly happening to me, that kind of gave me confirmation of what was transpiring in my life. And then God followed up with even further confirmation. What God later revealed to me was how the attacks was happening way before I even was completely aware of what was happening to me. And God kind of gave me a full circle moment in regards to when it all possibly began, and the degree of why God was calling me to separate myself from the circumstance and the situation with the individual I was involved with, because of the things that were being done behind my back and said behind my back that I wasn't aware of. And I was basically fighting for somebody who was fighting against me because of their insecurities outweighed the truth and the authenticity of what I was actually presenting to them. And that's what was being communicated to the people that the individual actually valued more so than the truth that I was actually presenting and speaking on. If I didn't have certain individuals in my life at the time that was witnessing the process of what I was enduring, and why I was having to move the way that I was moving, and watching me be stripped of the emotional needs that I needed to have taken care of in the moment, I can honestly say that things could have possibly been worse. But I'm grateful to God that God had already awakened me to, one, how to protect myself, two, how to see beyond what was being presented in front of me, and to be able to see beneath the lies. So